Hello, welcome back to our channel. We're in Hertz recording studio where we have produced bands like Behemoth, Decapitated, Vader and many more. In this video, I'm going to show you two methods of editing live drums perfectly to the click. Why would you do that? Well, after recording the drums, the next step in your project would probably be recording the guitars or the bass. And that's exactly where you need a perfectly edited drum track. It's easier to record and edit other instruments, or move some of the beats and pieces of the drum part around. No drummer plays like a drum machine. So let's see how we can achieve that quickly and easily. Let's dive right into it. Here I've got some drum recorded to the tempo track in the DAW. Let's listen. As you can see, many of those hits are not perfectly in line with the grid. So your task is to drag those hits that are off as close to the grid as possible. You shouldn't focus on each of the drummer's hits individually. What you should focus on is the bass drum, snare and the tom tracks. We'll leave the hi-hat and the ride tracks just as they were played by the drummer. The drummer recorded this song in several takes, so we need to glue them together. Be careful not to cut any of the hits. Select all of the beats and add crossface between them, then glue them together. Group all tracks in one folder. Enable group editing to be able to edit all of the tracks in the folder at once. Now let's start editing. Method 1 is to manually correct the recorded tracks. You can do it in any DAW. Let's start with aligning the first hit with the first beat of the bar. Then select the scissors tool, the number key 3 in Cubase, and cut the tracks right before the next hit. Then select the arrow tool, number key 1, and move the fragments to the right of the cut to the next grid. Go to the next hit, select the scissors, and cut the same way you did before, and drag the hit to the grid. Go to the next hit, select the scissors, and cut the tracks. Repeat these steps till the end of the drum part. It took me about 20 minutes to finish this song. Now select all of the beats and add crossface between them. Give it a final listen. Sounds really tight. Method 2 is similar to method 1, but with all those steps automated. Let's start with creating hit points for the bass drum and snare. Disable group editing and open the sample editor on the bass drum track. Set the threshold so that all the bass drum transients are detected. Looks good. Do the same thing for the snare. We don't want the program to detect every ghost note, and we definitely need to remove all of the hit points that are not snare hits. In fact, the number of hit points depends on how tight we want the final results to be done. Now separate the beats from the fills, because beats are usually not as rhythmically dense as fills. Separating the fills from the beats will drastically speed up the process. Let's color our fills red and our beats yellow. Re-enable group editing and start with the beats, the yellow slices. Open the Quantize panel and select the tracks you've prepared hit points for. In my case, it's the tracks bass drum Shure and the snare TPR20. Set the quantization priority. I'm giving 1 star to the bass drum and 2 stars to the snare, which means that when the bass drum and the snare hit at the same time, the snare will be quantized dead on to the grid, while the kick stroke will be ignored. Now set the offset, which determines how far before the actual hit point position the audio event is sliced. Be sure to set this value at around -20 to -15. Set the grid step according to the bass drum and the snare note length. Next, slice the audio events at hit points. Before the next step, you can set up soft quantize, the value that determines how close to the grid the audio bits should be moved, or, like in my case, disable this function. Now hit quantize and then crossfade. Let's give it a listen. Let's move on to our next bit. Check if the grid covers all of the bass drum and the snare hits. For this fragment, I need to change my grid to 1/16 to catch all of the bass drum hits. Now slice the events, hit quantize, and then add crossfades. Sounds great. Let's do it for the rest of the beat fragments. Let's move on to the fills. For such fragments, I prefer using the first manual editing method. It turns out to be more time efficient to edit the fills manually than to create additional hit points for the tom or cymbal hits. Now select all of the sliced hits and hit the X key to add crossfades. Let's use the Quantize panel on our next fill. Cut, quantize, and crossfade the events. Go over all of the fills in this way. Select all of the events and crossfade and glue the tracks. The second method took me half as much time as the first method. Let's have a final listen. I hope you enjoyed the video. Drum editing has been a standard procedure in every recording session today, and wherever you like it or not, it's crucial to know how to do it. In our next video, I'm going to show you another technique for drum editing, and we will listen to a quick comparison between all of them. If you like the video, subscribe us and leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and see you soon!